Morning, Fred. How you doing?
Good morning, Anil. I'm doing good.
So we normally, I have a habit about the weather when I start a conversation with someone. And before we started recording, I was joking with Fred. I'm like, I'm not going to ask you about the weather because I'm actually looking outside here in London and it's raining and it's gray. Um, but the funny thing is, the reason why I actually do that is it's like the first question my parents ask when I speak to them on the phone. Like, so how's the weather? And then you're like, and then the next day, how's the weather? And you're like, so Fred, how is the weather where you are right now?
Yeah. To be honest, I like that question. And it is rainy here in Zurich, and you can hear the raindrops dripping on the windowsill.
Ah, it's a good sound.
And I think it's nice just to, you kind of set the tone, you tune into someone, especially these days. It's a little bit like, where are you?
Yeah.
And, what's the weather like? It kind of sets the scene a little bit. I think that's nice.
Do you
So,
know?
rain for both of us.
No, exactly. There are times when you're on the phone with like a call center and you're like, hey, oh, what's your name? Blah, blah. How's the weather where you are? It's like, are they in the same country? Or are they in another country? Is it
Exactly.
sunny?
Yeah.
And if they don't tell you where they are, it's like, so is it sunny? Yes. Oh, okay. So it must be
Yeah.
somewhere warm. But cool. Well, Fred, as always, it's a pleasure to get back together with you and have a chat. I think today we want to talk about authentic leadership, or another way I put it also is how do you exercise humility in leadership, especially in this day and age. Um, so I think not to kind of just dive into it, but when you think of authentic leadership, Fred, what are the first, let's say, two or three words that come to mind?
Mm. I was gonna babble on, and then you asked me to for something very succinct.
I mean, hey man, we can still
Uh,
Babylon. I've got it. And then like you know what? That reminds me of those three words. And
yeah, yeah, exactly. So maybe good leadership is very succinct and clear, and I don't have that, so I'm just gonna babble on
Babylon, ideate
instead.
me.
Yeah, authentic leadership is kind of a theme that I felt has come up a lot recently. That's why I put it on my list of topics. And I think yours, humility in leadership, sounded similar enough. So let's see where that takes us. Um, it's something about being a leader and a manager at work and wanting to be yourself, bringing your whole self there, bringing your personal values, um, that it's part of your personal mission. And when managers are younger and find themselves in leadership positions, I think it's kind of like a new search for identity. Like once again, you have to find yourself not just as an individual, but how are you as a leader? And it's very tempting to copy someone else's leadership style or to try to fit into a certain mold, and then that causes some challenge, like you're supposed to be so visionary, and then maybe that doesn't come naturally, and that's kind of the search for that combination of being yourself and being a leader.
Something the be yourself piece is really important because I'm someone who's actually fallen prey to comparing myself and wanting to almost be a chameleon when it comes to other people's leadership styles. So whether it be my manager or his manager or a peer, I'm almost like, ooh, I kind of like how they do that. I'd like to, but exactly as you said, if that's not who you are, it's either not going to last or you're going to be found out pretty quickly that that's
Mm.
not actually your style of leadership. Why are you? And you might, I mean, that goes down a slippery slope. But
Mm. Yeah. But at the same time, you do want to develop, right? Just like
yes,
you want to develop as a person, and you see someone who behaves in a very admirable way, and you think, oh, yeah, that's cool. I want to be more like that. I think that also works, the kind of becoming part works both personally and in leadership as well. That you do want to be inspired and you do want the mentorship and that kind of development. But I don't know, maybe you don't want to take it just too much off the shelf or too willy nilly. Like you really have to integrate it and make it your own. Maybe that's the lesson there.
I agree. It's weaving it into your DNA and almost kind of making it more natural. And I think that's why going back to being yourself, and how you are as a leader or how you want to be a leader. Yeah, I've read certain books and passages that kind of talk about how leadership is actually natural. And I've also read some books that say like, well, actually leadership is actually developed depending on your experiences. Do you
Hmm.
fall into one camp or another? Do you think leadership stems from your origins, like, it's more nature, or do you see maybe leadership is more nurture, and through experience?
Mm,
What's your take
yeah,
on that?
yeah. I don't want to avoid the question, but I do think it's a bit of both. Like
Okay.
some people clearly have these, what we think of intuitively as leadership qualities from a younger age, and it seems to come more naturally to them in terms of conviction and vision and getting other people to listen and follow. That has to be one of the basic things, right? Someone is leading and other people are following is like a basic mechanism of what leadership is. Um, some people do that very well. With, let's say, if you're a good leader from a young age, it's something really special because it's unclear what it's based on. Whereas, of course, if someone is a seasoned manager, is very competent, and has a great track record, that their leadership can be based on that competence. And I think that that's what you see, that it also often develops over time, and it certainly can be developed. I do believe in that.
I agree. And as much as I also would not want to avoid the question, I too believe it's also a bit of both. It's a bit of nature and nurture. I think there are some leaders who just have it natural in them, and they nurture it, develop it over time. And there might be some that have it, but maybe might steer clear of it. They're like, actually, no, I just don't want that extra stress or added pressure, or and so they can almost, you can almost split off. And
Yeah.
there might be some that don't have it and it's not natural to them, but they're able to develop it, um, whether it's forged through crisis, or they get thrust into a job or into a role, and they've got to just kind of sink or swim, and they find their way not only to take themselves forward but also those around them.
Yeah, I think that's right. Isn't it something we see with a lot of capabilities, that some people are kind of naturals, and,
Yeah,
and some people are late bloomers?
yeah, I do.
Authors talk about that as well. Some people are naturally authors and they write their bestseller when they're 22, and other people, grind it out and become great over time and write their first bestseller when they're, I don't know, 50.
See, and that's kind of also what's been playing on my mind. I had a chat with a friend of mine last week, and we were talking about humility and leadership. And the
Hmm.
reason why it came up with that is there's authentic leadership, as you rightly said, being true to yourself, knowing your own style, and then allowing your experiences to kind of forge and feedback you take on, and to kind of become the leader that you want to be. I feel that folks, let's say in the early stages of their career, um, may take. I'm going to be kind of black and white here. One of two paths. One path is they want to be humble. They want to like let their experiences happen over time, and kind of climb and grow. And then there
Mm.
are others who see, someone my age, graduating from college, who's making a six-figure salary, driving a fast car, living in a nice apartment. Ooh, I want that. And they're now a director. I want to be and they chase that title. And so it's almost like
Yes.
they want it now, or
Hmm.
they wanted it yesterday. And they
Yeah.
may or may not want to work hard for that opportunity.
Yeah. And to continue that kind of stereotype, or those, I don't know, archetypal or kind of outline paths, uh, if you embrace the leadership kind of too quickly rather than growing into it, it's something about listening as well, that young leaders might have a tendency. They have to be so visionary and set the direction and run out ahead. It is tricky to combine that with listening and admitting that you don't know something, right? So I think that's something we've all seen, this visionary leader who talks a lot but cannot admit to not knowing something, and taking advice and listening to the expertise of others. There is some kind of trade-off there. Like, it doesn't have to be a trade-off, but in practice it often is.
You're right. And it's sometimes even, they're not necessarily even admitting they don't know something. They're actually admitting that they're wrong,
Mm.
and kind
Yeah.
of going, hey, my mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something
Cool.
admirable, right? We all want to be able to take advice
Yeah.
and admit when we're wrong. There's a kind of vulnerability that's a strength that we see more when we grow up.
See, I was going to ask you another question and go back a direction, but I think now I want to linger on that for a moment. So I struggle with that because I feel there are people who are welcome, or they welcome being vulnerable, not controlling the outcome, admitting, hey, didn't know that, or made a mistake, or, and okay, and what does it mean next? And growing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel there are others who aren't so keen to admit fault or admit, that they don't know something. They kind of almost, find their way around it.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and maybe eventually they're found out, or maybe not. And so I always wonder how, is a good leader one or the other? Is a leader someone who should be able to be vulnerable and
Mm-hmm.
admit fault? Or is it okay if a leader, stiff upper lip, kind of confident
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
saying, oh, okay, well, we're just gonna take that on board and move right on, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of as if nothing happened. Do you think one's better than the other?
I will answer this one more clearly. Yes, I think the kind of honest, open, vulnerable is a little bit better. I think it tends to show more personal maturity. I think it's possible still to combine with like a visionary and confidence, and, that kind of leadership of showing the way. There's no contradiction there. And when you start, I don't know, skirting around the issues or not taking responsibility, there is some self deception there that I think, may or may not come back to bite you. I think there's also something like old school, kind of military about it. And the world we live in now is different.
Mm-hmm.
The leader or manager cannot expect to know everything and just delegate tasks. The people on the team are going to be getting a lot of information themselves, and then they have to make those decisions. So I think that's a more kind of modern approach that is more geared towards leadership rather than like old school management. And then this openness and humility, I think, works better in terms of assimilating new information and about adapting and making a decision and reevaluating. So it's kind of more iterative approach.
I'm smiling because I'm now thinking as I hear you say that, I agree. I find that, tell me what you think here. So you've got leaders who, let's say, are their middle, maybe late stages of their careers, right? And you've got these up and coming, young men, young women who are like, right, they're on charge, and they're actually maybe more even switched on than we are, than we were at their stage of their career, at their age, and they're ready to kind of fail fast almost. Um, and I find that there are these leaders that are a bit older and senior who are like, oh, wait, are you gonna like try to take over, and but you lack experience. So, and I have that experience. So, you know, I'm going to hold you back a bit and almost
Mm,
suppress your ambition, your your appetite, and
right.
almost go, you'll get that when you're ready.
Yeah.
Do you feel like we're at that stage in time, or do you feel like no, actually we're on pace to allow these, these young guns to kind of really just come in and get things done?
Yeah. I I don't know like where people and companies are at, but I think it's definitely important to listen to young people because things are changing so quickly that decades of experience, it's not that it's bad, but it's actually more difficult to stay current. And I think that's true for everyone, like software developers with new paradigms and new programming languages and things like that. You have to stay current. And the same is true for managers. Just again, coming back to kind of a technology example, the first time I was involved in startups, it was like you had to have all your own servers and you had to pay a lot of money for um, software licenses. And then a few years later, you still had to get your own servers, but there was a lot more open source. And that was a big shift, I think, that a lot of people had to adapt to. And then you fast forward another 5 years. Not only was it all about like open source and not really having that much software licensing costs necessarily, but then also having the infrastructure on tap and not at all wanting to own your own servers and have them in one location. So those kind of shifts are technical and they're cultural, and we have to adapt. And with the humility and the openness, it doesn't disadvantage younger people or older people, but I think that's kind of the paradigm.
No, it's fair. I recall being in a conversation in retail, so not so much on the tech space, but hey, tech is now making, well, it's
Mm,
already in retail, right?
sure.
We're shifting to a digital marketplace faster than we expected, especially with COVID. Remember sitting in the meeting room and one managing director speaking to a CEO, and the managing director said to the CEO, "Look, you need to get out of the way of some of the youth in your business and let them do what they know they need to do because they are current. They do know what the pulse is of the consumer. They know what the pulse is of the marketplace, where things are going. If anything, use your experience to guide them, to steer them, to empower them.
Yeah.
Don't inhibit them."
Mm,
And that's kind of tough, I'm sure, for anyone with experience and likely an ego to go, what do you mean step aside? So, and it's not like someone in let's say in the middle to late part of their career is going to want to go learn programming or go, open up a shop and run the till or replenish product. Like
mm,
it's almost say like, okay, let these guys, but how do we take what they know and almost channel that to leading even the next generation? I mean,
yeah.
it's why think it needs to be step by step? It's like, no, let's do it all in tandem.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's nice. I feel like that brings it back to the humility that you talked about. Did you also say like leading from the back or something like that? Or maybe I just thought about that.
No,
Um,
let's actually chat about that, because I think
mm,
leading from, again, this is where it comes to, should someone who's more experienced lead from the back
yeah.
or lead from the front
Hmm.
versus someone who doesn't have that much experience but has an intellect and ideas
Yeah.
that could like you said, that are current,
Yeah.
to kind
Yeah.
of push things on. What's your take on that? Because I do feel like even the definition of leading from behind has changed. What's your take?
Yeah. I mean, I really like that. And I think that's a very natural life cycle that you are first focused on learning in life, and then you're focused on delivering and achieving something, and then you're more focused on serving, perhaps. And so making that transition from achieving to serving, you can still be a leader in many ways, but really putting other people forward, letting them hustle, letting them, get out there and take the lead, and you can take a lot of pride in developing other people. And yeah, that is a type of leadership that I think is very important, and that does require the humility as well.
I agree, Fred. I think that's beautiful. Learning, delivering, serving.
Mm.
And initially when I heard you say that, I thought linear, right? In the early stage of your career, you learn, then you deliver, and then you serve. Kind of. But I'm actually nowadays it's circular,
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
right?
that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's almost like, and the reason why I say that is I do feel that there are, again, not to say there are folks early stages of their career um, who are expected to deliver in order to get to that next promotion or that next phase, the next role in their career. So they're almost like, hey, I'm learning quick, but I need to deliver quick. But maybe they're not taught or empowered to serve quick, if that makes sense, and like
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
serve at the early stage, and not think they have to wait to later stages to do that.
I like that. It's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's but going back to what you were saying in terms of authentic leadership, ironically coming full circle, when we think about authentic leadership at a young age, you're still figuring yourself out at a young age. You don't know maybe who you are, what you are. Um, how would you define, maybe, or maybe explain authentic leadership when you're in college or in your first job out of college? What do you think is
Mm.
authentic leadership at that stage?
I think there's something like at some point the penny drops in terms of self-reflection.
Hmm.
That I remember, from myself and friends as teenagers, we tended to think that we were always in a high energy state, and that, when things were going wrong, it was other people's fault, like our parents, something like that. And I think it's something that a lot of people experience with relationships as well. You have a few relationships, and in the beginning, it's the other person's fault. Like
Yeah.
she did that, and then the next one, she did that. And then you see the common theme is me.
Yes.
That story,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
And then you're
I
like, oh
agree.
my God, I've been doing this. and you can develop a different sense of self-reflection and taking responsibility and seeing how you cause the world that surrounds you. So I think that's the process, and that can happen. There are a lot of young people who have incredible self-awareness. It's something that I've actually been very impressed by. I work with students, and I'm super impressed by these self-reflective qualities, which I think will serve them well to kind of hopefully start to answer your question.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that I think that's where it starts. That you can develop the competence and you can do different things and you learn as you go. Um, but it's a kind of self-reflective leadership where you develop qualities and where you say, actually, these things are really coming across to my team, and some other things are not going across. When I behave this way, people follow because they want to, because it makes sense. And another time, you kind of have to push it a little bit too far, and feel like you're maybe overreaching in order to get the results.
I mean, yeah, I could not agree with you more on the me generation. I know they say it's the me generation. I disagree. I think that's just a
Mm.
phase in your life where you're kind of like, yeah, but what about me?
Yeah.
I've kind of jotted it down as the 20s up to your 20s. It's the me. What about me? But
Mm.
what does that mean to me? So, and then when you get into your 30s, it's more about the us, and how are we going to, and what are we going to do, and how do we want to do it?
Mm.
And then I feel like when you get into that 40s, 50s, it's all about, well, what about you? And what would you like to do? And how do you want to do it? And again, I know I'm putting ages on that, and I'm probably
Mm-hmm.
going to get,
I think it's nice. Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's good to simplify to get an idea of
Yeah.
something, and then
I mean, it
it's
doesn't
not
mean that
true.
in your
It's also
30s, you're
not
not
true
going
for
to,
everyone.
yeah.
Some people really never grow up.
Fred, we're growing up, right?
I think so. I think so.
Trust me, I have my moments where I'm like, man, I really need to grow
Yeah.
up. I'm sure when you have kids, it's like time to grow up. It's someone else's turn to be a kid.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's very eye-opening,
Yeah,
frightening in some ways.
I believe it, mate. I mean, I believe it. I'm not experiencing it, but I'm gonna take it from a father of two. Um, Fred, going back to how you nurture the self-awareness of some of the youth that you work with, I think that's powerful because I think they are aware, but they can steer I'm not gonna say, well, yeah, one way, the right way, or the other, the wrong way. So you take social media, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get a like, they get a dislike, they get an engagement, they don't get an engagement. Suddenly that self-awareness that's so powerful at their age could actually work against them. How, not to say specifically to social media, but how have you nurtured the self-awareness of some of the youth that you've spoken to, that you've worked with?
Mm. Well, I was primarily thinking about just listening to them
Mm-hmm.
and hearing this self-reflection and this maturity that they can develop so much, and there's so much material and so much insight available. It's something that's come up with people my own age as well, where we have these talks like we seem to be searching much more for meaning than our parents did. They
Mm-hmm.
just kind of hunkered down, stiff upper lip, just worked, and we are in this situation where we're thinking about, is this job meaningful? Does this company have the same values as I do? And,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I should do something else, just like quit this job and do something that's more meaningful and fulfilling for me spiritually. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something very luxurious that I think it comes at a certain age, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also generational. So it's like multiple waves on top of each other.
I love that because I was chatting with a colleague last week about when you're 18, at least in the US, you're applying, you're going to college and you have to pick a major. Are you going to become a lawyer? You're going to become a doctor? Are you going to become an architect, an engineer, or none of the above? You're actually going to say, I'm going to skip college. I'm going to do a startup, and be successful.
Mm.
Like, who knows? And at that age, it's like you don't even know, like you've got a majority of your life ahead. How do you know like what's the right career for you, or the right, but you
Yeah.
make a decision and you do it. And I agree. I think that it is a generation now where we and probably our kids will search for meaning. It's like, yeah, I went down this path, and rather than sticking to it like my parents might have, I actually want to deviate. So my parents may have been doctors. I actually want to go into art, or I want to go into teaching, or I want to go into drawing. And I think I think that I'm grateful for that. I think it's really good. And by the way, I feel that it's something that has been gifted to us by our parents. They worked hard. They've gone through, I would say in a sense, much tougher times, relatively speaking, than
Yeah.
we have. And they've hunkered down and given us, a roof over our head, food on our plates. And I think the opportunity to search for that meaning, and that, okay, if what I decided at the age of 18, 12 years later, that's not the right path for me, I can rediscover and go in a different direction. And I have that opportunity
Yeah.
because of the approach my parents took to their lives.
Absolutely. And I think it also comes with this fast pace of change
Mhm.
that it was much more conceivable a generation ago to basically have one job and one skill set and then just, work that over a 40-year career, whether that's now becoming much less likely, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, it is. Tell me a bit more about that. What are you thinking when it comes to that?
That the environment is changing,
Mhm.
the tools we use to do a job, uh, automation, and also this appreciation. So some of the waves, like I think there is this big spiritual wave that I see. Yeah, it's like a deviation from traditional values in terms of what's important in life and what happiness means, and searching for status and these kind of things. Um,
If you think about that, though, for what you just said in terms of the pace of change and all those areas you mentioned, that's a lot. Like, I
mhm.
mean, and it's, I think what we, again, if you're that aware and you know that, ooh, environment's changing, tools are changing, things are getting automated, you know, things becoming more spiritual, more sustainable, more about purpose, deviating from previous values. And I mean, that's a lot for people to, let's say, take in, digest, and push
Yeah.
forward on, especially if you're in the early stage of your career, let alone if you're in the latter stages of your career. I think so. I think either way, this is a lot. The pace, it's never going to get slower.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
anything, it's going to get faster. How do people manage through that, at different ends of the spectrum of their career?
That's a great question. I just wanted to say, I thought something that's somewhat related. I've been so impressed when I hear the stories of young people having like their first job interview with a big consumer goods company, and they look their interviewer in the eye and say, like, what are you guys doing to become sustainable?
Yeah.
And I find it so ballsy. It gives me goosebumps. Like when we were starting out, and I think it's still the case for a lot of people. You're just you just want the job. You want to do everything you can to get the job, and to be that demanding and to be that principled, to ask about those things that are important to you, and really hold the company accountable. I find that super admirable, and yeah, very cool when I hear those stories.
I love that. And I agree because you're right. Back in the day, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was like, so
Mm.
you're for profit, great. If you make the profit, I get a bonus. What is my bonus percent? As opposed to, what bonus are you offering to the community? What
Yeah.
bonuses are you offering to the world? Like, what are you trying to do to lead change and purpose? And I think purpose has become so much, it's been given meaning. Like, I think
Hmm.
back in the day, purpose could be, I think it's very clear now. Purpose is driving towards something better, something that just, I think it almost transcends the P&L,
Hmm.
and earnings per share and stock price, et cetera. It's like, it's true intrinsic value, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Uh,
I think that's a real challenge for companies because some companies have easier access to some believable idea of purpose, and for some companies, it's really a stretch. So there's an interesting parallel there between how companies are changing and how individuals are changing. We think about um, authentic leadership and humility in leadership from individuals, and then authentic purpose and maybe even humility from companies, as opposed to being like, look, we just make a ton of money and that's fine. It's maybe it is fine, but it doesn't sound as sexy anymore, does it?
I think for some it does. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, but I'm glad that there is a rising group where it doesn't.
Mm.
And I think I was in a meeting last year around our pension plan, and there was some. And I'm sorry, I use the term young guns. I just think they're young guns, right? And they're ready to go. And the question they asked the individual giving the presentation was, well, this is great about our pension and that you guys will invest it. And do you guys have sustainable stocks, or do you guys have a measure of the companies in your funds that that rate them in terms of low to high in terms of sustainability and purpose, and or do you have just a purpose fund? And and I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, that's brilliant, because you don't think in a sense long term, earnings for a company that's got a higher rating on its sustainability or its purpose, let alone for these kids in their retirement. But I'm like, they're thinking about that.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant. It's a different way of thinking. And it's something that we need.
Absolutely.
So I am grateful. So it's kind of funny. When we started this conversation out, I was like, hey, do you think folks will have, that serving sense in the early stage of their career? And I think we've given ourselves a few examples where they do learn, they do deliver, and they are serving, in their own right. It's just, again, it's not in the traditional, it's in the current way.
And hopefully not forcing us, to close the loop on that, but that is very much a form of leadership.
Yeah.
That is a type of leadership that young people have, to just say, well, what about this topic? What about the importance of these other things? And it is knowing the way and showing the way in a very, in a very big way.
No, it's and I think that's why I think we have a responsibility to not second guess. Maybe we can challenge, but not doubt and second guess these young guns when they have these ideas, and when they do want to see where it can take us and what it can do, what it can be. I picked up on an idea that, and maybe we've discussed or not, but it's a quote that I heard from someone, and basically it's, you have beliefs. Those beliefs, when you go into crisis, they're tested.
Yeah.
And when they're tested, when you come out of the crisis, if they held strong, then they turn into conviction. And crisis is what actually separates players from pretenders. And I'm thinking about these young guns, and let's just take the last year, if not even last 5 years, but just the last 12 months.
Sure.
I mean, I would love to chat to a young gun and go, hey, like, so what were your beliefs pre 2020? What are your beliefs like after, having gone through 2020? And therefore, what's going to stick and stay with you? And were you able to rise up and challenge yourself, or did you fall down and kind of go, oh no, but I wanted to have my XYZ? I'd love to ask them that and see where they're.
I think that's a super interesting topic. And I like the idea of, you have these beliefs. And when we talk about beliefs, it sometimes seems a little bit loose. Are we really held to them? Do we really act as if they're true? Do we live by them? And conviction sounds much firmer. So as you say, it's like our beliefs are tested, and maybe they're kind of washed off by reality, or maybe they're really firmed up into a real conviction. So I like that distinction. And I think it is a very good question. What beliefs actually stick as you, face reality, and as you go through life. These things change, and hopefully it will, the good ones do stick.
I mean, that's like one of those fingers crossed. I think time will tell. And it's, when we go into 2021, and as there's a vaccine, as the elections in the US, fingers crossed again, get resolved, and whatever direction that goes. And I think it's gonna be the dawn of a new age. And we're already going through it. And it's not to use, by the way, I don't know about you, mate, but there are terms I'm so grateful I'm not hearing anymore. Unprecedented times, unexpected times, the new norm, abnorm. And I'm like, oh, so whatever 2021 is going to be called, that's around the corner. We'll figure that out. But I am kind of keen to see how the youth really do, how they step up to the plate, and how do they approach their career, their life, personal, professional, in a different way. And I'm also keen to hear how folks in the further stages of their career react as well. Are they going to slow down? Are they going to feel like they need to speed up? Are they going to feel like, oh, what was meant to happen 5 years away is happening now? So it's some real interesting questions. And then, are some of these beliefs that have turned into convictions, are they going to stick when things return to normal or not?
Yeah. Just wanted to say, amazing questions. I
No,
think, yeah.
don't worry. We'll
Not
we'll
to,
find time over the next
kind of
six to
felt
12 months
I
to answer
wanted
them.
to, not intrude my opinion on that, but I think those are great questions that require and warrant further exploration.
I think what we're going to do is after we're done recording, we're going to rewind it and go, right, let's just jot those questions down
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like
yeah,
address them at a later stage.
yeah.
Uh,
Because we kind of went as we hadn't planned this conversation. We started about authentic leadership, and then we focused a lot on the younger generation. I
mhm.
think that's yeah, just an interesting shift.
I mean, and I believe so because I think that again, I think of that term servant leadership, and
Hmm.
I feel it's used, I've heard it used a couple times in the careers of folks that are either leaving the company I work with or are leaving the company I work with to retire. Like, and I'm kind of like, okay, that's brilliant, but does that mean you're necessarily having to wait to that stage of your career to be a servant leader? And
Mm.
is the traditional definition of servant leader valid, or do we need to rethink it based on? I love what you said, based on current times, and how do we almost nurture the young guns and the folks in the early mid stage of their career to be thinking about that, so they don't feel like they need to wait till later to serve. They can serve now, like we've been discussing, by asking the questions they don't.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think that sounds like a great kind of lesson to dwell on for companies, like how that can be incorporated. And it makes me think of, sabbaticals with service, student organizations that actually work with service. I think there are a lot of good examples, people who are involved in religious and volunteer work. It is about learning service from a young age, and maybe there is a corporate version of that as well. It makes me think of, some companies have this idea where younger people actually mentor the older people because it's about technology and change. So I think that's a nice way, and the theme there is again like about self-reflection and something being circular rather than linear. So it's not just one line. There are these lessons and these processes that repeat
Mhm.
on a monthly basis or over a 5-year period or longer as well. It's more like a series of circles as opposed to something just one long line.
I agree. I This is gonna be random. I'm gonna go a bit. So you ready to kind of just?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, cool. So I think back to when I was in high school, and in order to get into a great university, my dad said, "Hey, bud, you need to do like non schoolwork per se, like do well at school, but extracurricular activities, right? Volunteer, do debate,
yeah. Mm.
travel, like do certain things that allow you to almost become a more well-rounded person." And I said, brilliant. So I did that, got into a great school, got into a great program. Hey, here I am today. And I think about, the youth in a company, right? And I always say this about myself. I think I've thought less about doing volunteer work in the company than I probably did when I was in high school. I have friends that do volunteer work and who do find ways outside of work to contribute back to the community
Mm.
or a cause. I have friends of mine who are doing some amazing athletic events. My manager ran 82 kilometers in a day, in the name of a great cause in terms of diabetes and raising money there. Another friend of mine next week, he's going to be doing the Everest Challenge on Zwift,
Wow.
again, to raise money, for a good cause. I mean, the guy's going to be on his bike for 10 plus hours nonstop climbing Everest. I'm like mental, but I'm absolutely blown away by it. And the reason why I'm giving these examples is I feel that when you look at our end of year or start of year and end of year, like targets, it's all about business. It's all about team. It's all about, there's nothing in there that kind of goes, yeah, but what are you going to give back?
Hmm.
And how are you going to serve, whether it be your family, your community, your team, your business, out as a target to almost nurture that idea and almost build in some of that, not to force the humility into people, but almost get them thinking about that. So it's not just about
Yeah.
hitting that sales number or saving that extra buck, or do you know what I mean? Like, so it's just,
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
so it's
And
just,
there's
I'm
a
sorry,
nice
that's what I was like.
connection
It's just
there.
a bit of a free
Yeah,
thought,
yeah, yeah.
but
No, and I think it's interesting because there is a connection to leadership there,
Mhm.
because leadership is about energy and attitude as opposed to just hard resources.
Mhm.
And once you start appreciating energy and attitude, you need to think more broadly. So that's how it kind of all fits in for me.
So in a way, if we think back to the first question I asked you about authentic leadership, I think we've got your 2-3+ words. We've got the energy, we've got the attitude, we've got the be yourself, we've got the ability to learn, deliver, and serve. As we said, it's circular. Someone who's able to be born with it, but then also capable of nurturing it. Someone who's open to allowing their beliefs to be tested in crisis, forged in it, and turn into conviction. Someone who, like you said, is willing to teach above and below, and just listen. I mean, I think it's and used all of those attributes to manage that fast pace of change. And I made, there you go. So I think we've got a list of, I think, 20, 30 words in that, but I think that's brilliant. And
yeah, I like your summary as always.
Cheers. Thanks, man. I'm got the note taking here. So it's like, do you disagree or no? And Fred, what I really admire about what you said at the start is like, you're nurturing, you're helping, young guns, nurture that self-awareness. As am I, my team, especially as we go through some uncertain times, whether it be COVID fatigue or this reorganization that's happening at Nike, that fatigue, it's helping people think differently and shift their mindset and know that there's so much more they can do and contribute to themselves, to their family, to their community, to their team, and to the business. And it's just a matter of time until things turn around and hopefully continue in an upward trajectory or swing.
Yeah. Definitely the right way to go.
Cool,
it's
man.
Good stuff.
Any other final closing thoughts from your side, bud?
No, just happy to be chatting with you again. Yeah. Wonderful day to spend lunchtime.
I was going to say, man, indeed. Have you found out what you're going to have for lunch yet?
Grilled cheese sandwiches.
Nice one, man. So by the way, not to go back to how we started this, but yes, when I speak to my parents, one of those common questions is not only how you doing, what's the weather like over there, but what'd you have for dinner?
Classic.
Man. So needless to say, we started and end with those common questions. So enjoy those grilled cheese sandwiches, Fred. Man, that sounds tasty. Add a little sriracha sauce on the side, mate. That always adds a bit of flavor.
Will do.
Nice one. Well, hey, Fred, thanks again, bud. Really great catching up with you. And until next week.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, mate. As always. Take care, everyone. Big hugs.
Ciao.